Seems like Nick Saban wins it all every other year, because he does. 6 natties in his last 13 years, and he's favored to make it 7 in 14 as Bama returns arguably the 2 best players in college football. They have last year's Heisman winner Bryce Young on offense and the favorite to go #1 in next year's NFL draft on defense, Will Anderson Jr.
These guys have tremendous pride in performance. I could never been happier with 2 guys in terms of what they mean to the program.
Young will attempt to become the first back-to-back Heisman winner since Archie Griffin nearly a half-century ago.
Winning a Heisman is obviously a huge honor, but also I understand that that doesn't entitle me to anything.
And while he figures to continue thriving in his second year as starter, he'll do so with a new cast of cohorts. The Crimson Tide made use of the transfer portal, bringing in wideout Jermaine Burton from Georgia and running back Jamir Gibbs from Georgia Tech. On defense, Anderson will be joined by one of the most experienced groups of the Saban era, 8 senior starters.
I appreciate my group a lot because we all have the same mindset, all have the same mentality, and we push each other every day at practice. We want to be great.
The Tide will likely have their first major test week 2 as they head to Austin to take on the Horns. The first matchup between these two since Saban won his first national title with the Tide back in '09. And the second Saturday of October features perhaps the most anticipated matchup of the season. Texas A&M coming to Tuscaloosa, a game everybody's got circled on the calendar after that war of words between Saban and Jimbo in the spring.
A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness.
It's despicable that a reputable head coach can come out and say this. Some people think they're God. Go dig into how God did this deal. You may find out about a lot of things you don't want to know. Go dig into his past.
Both say that little spat is a thing of the past, water under the bridge. But we'll see if that consternation comes flooding back when the rubber hits the road this season, which is just around the corner. Alabama, #1 in the AP poll and #1 in our CBS Sports ranking of all 131 teams in FBS play. The Crimson Tide in their 15th season under Nick Saban, #1 in our rankings, just ahead of Ohio State. Saban has led his team to the college football playoff 7 of the last 8 times, and they have the most CFP appearances all time with 7. Here's the top 10. Bama, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Utah, and Clemson. Notre Dame is 6, Oklahoma 7, Michigan, the defending Big Ten champion, is 8, Texas A&M 9th, and Baylor 10th. These are our rankings. You can find the full list at cbssports.com. Let's talk about #1 with Barrett Sallee from SEC Country here on HQ. Barrett, how clear-cut is Bama at #1 for you?
Well, I had a little bit of a discussion, mental discussion anyway, between Alabama and Ohio State. But in the end, when you have the 2 best players in college football, and Will Anderson and Bryce Young, it's going to take a lot to overcome that. So to me, Alabama, with what they have returning, especially defensively, a very veteran-laden group defensively, coupled with the Heisman Trophy winner offensively, yeah, they get the nod. But I at least considered Ohio State a little bit, because of C.J. Stroud, because of the new defensive coordinator, because of the skill players on offense. But, Alabama proved last year they can beat the very best. They did beat the very best when they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. And, of course, when it comes to talent, nobody has more talent than Nick Saban.
In the package leading into this, I mentioned that this is the first time that Alabama is going to face off with Texas since they were in the national championship game about 13 years ago or so. Barrett, Alabama and Nick Saban totally different than they were back then. I mean, still on top of the college football mountain, but how have they been able to stay one of the best defensive programs in the country while also scoring 40 points a game?
Chris, Nick Saban gets criticized for being stubborn, and he's anything but stubborn. In fact, he's one of the most flexible coaches in all of college football. I wrote a story with an excerpt from the book that John Talty wrote saying that Nick Saban cried after the kick 6 in 2013, and that's the genesis for this offensive renaissance. He went out and hired Lane Kiffin that offseason. At the same time, he tried to lobby the NCAA to slow football down. That's what great coaches do. They lobbied for the change they want while adjusting to the change they need. And since that time in 2014, they ripped off 3 straight SEC championships once Lane Kiffin was there, and the rest is history. So Nick Saban has done a great job during his career in Tuscaloosa, evolving from the run the ball and play defense and defense wins championships mindset to the new age mindset, which is offense wins championships and just enough defense does, as long as you have enough given any specific circumstance. And right now, Alabama's handling those circumstances just fine.
You mentioned mindsets. Let's talk Heisman voting mindset with Bryce Young. Right? He won the Heisman last season, trying to become the first to go back-to-back in nearly 50 years. It's only happened once. Archie Griffin, running back for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But voters tend to shy away from the previous year's winner if he comes back to school. So in your mind, what would Bryce Young have to do to win it again?
He would have to have an absolutely ungodly season. And that's not fair to him. Look, I'm a Heisman voter. I don't necessarily care about what I'm about to tell you, but a lot of voters, like you said, they will not put a player on a ballot 2 years in a row. A lot of players will look at their ballot and say, okay, I've got 3 choices. Well, I'm going to pick Will Anderson. Then I can't pick another Alabama guy, can I? So, I think, yes, Bryce Young might be the best player in college football. What he did last year with no offensive line was nothing short of miraculous. But I think some things are working against him. His teammate, the fact that he won it last year, and the fact that some of the other contenders, like C.J. Stroud, are really good players. So it's unfair to Bryce. And again, I don't factor in any of those issues when I fill out my ballot. But I know a lot of other voters, some of whom don't even really work in the sports industry anymore, will think that way. So I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Bryce Young to win the Heisman this year, as a lot of folks think.
First since Lamar Jackson back in 2016 to return after winning the Heisman. We'll talk about their other Heisman contender, the one on the defensive side of the ball, in just a minute. But let's continue with the offense and the wide receiver position, which has been the deepest position for anybody lately. I mean, just an embarrassment of riches. Over the last 3 seasons, they've had 5 wide receivers taken in the first round of the draft. This time, though, Saban going to the transfer portal to get Jermaine Burton from Georgia. How is he going to fill the shoes of the Williams and the Mechis of the world?
Well, I think he fits the Jameson Williams mold perfectly. I mean, you look at Jameson Williams, he was the 4th best wide receiver at Ohio State, still super talented, and just absolutely blew up in Tuscaloosa. You go back to look at what Jermaine Burton did at Georgia. He was behind 3 freshmen in terms of catches. So he's talented, but he wasn't getting the run in an offense that really wasn't pass heavy anyway. So I think he'll fit in nicely. I think Jermaine Burton is one of those guys where a lot of folks think he's good, not great, but I think when you look at the talent that he possesses, he fits much better with what Alabama wants to do. He can stretch the field deep, especially when you have other weapons around you like he does. I think he can be a superstar. Now, look, can he be Jameson Williams? That's pretty aggressive, right? That's a high bar, a lofty goal. But he's going to be pretty darn good. Could he be a 1,000-yard receiver? Absolutely. 1,200? Sure. I think he has that kind of talent.
So they got him from Georgia, and they get their running back from Georgia Tech. Jamir Gibbs coming in, averaged over 100 yards from scrimmage last year with the Yellow Jackets. What's he going to do for the Crimson Tide?
Well, super versatile. I think that's the biggest thing is versatility for Jamir Gibbs. He can pound the rock between the tackles. We saw that at Georgia Tech. But then you look back at what he can do from a physicality standpoint. He's got the speed. You can get him the ball in space, and he can take off like he did right there on that 75-yard run in the spring game. You can use him as a receiver out of the backfield in a variety of different ways. So he just brings so much versatility to that offense. I think when folks think Georgia Tech running back, he's not a star. Yes, he is. That guy can be a superstar, and I think in terms of all-purpose backs, he might be one of the best all-purpose backs in the country. He's not like Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson was a little different. He was more of a bruiser. I think Jamir Gibbs, the all-around game is there, and as long as Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator of the Crimson Tide, gets him the ball in a variety of different ways, you're talking about a potential first or second team All-American.
Let's go over to defense, where we find Alabama's best player, the best player in the country, Will Anderson. 17 sacks last season. Somehow not even close to the school record, though. Does he approach Derek Thomas's unofficial NCAA record of 27 sacks that he set back in '88?
No, and that's not a knock against Will Anderson, but at some point they're just going to put 5 offensive linemen on him, and let somebody else come rush the passer. And then on top of that, it's Alabama, right? The fact that a lot of these games are out of reach by midway through the third quarter means you don't want Will Anderson out there. And he has been banged up a little bit at times throughout his career. So they're going to get him rest. They understand, hey, you need him for the long haul. So breaking Derek Thomas's record, I think in this day and age, it's just going to be almost impossible for anybody to do that, because not only do you have to get those snaps, but you have to make sure that they're not keying in on you all the time. So for Alabama, for Georgia, for Ohio State, all these great teams, you have an 8 or a 9-man rotation on the defensive line. And yes, that includes even at edge with Will Anderson Jr. So no, I don't think he gets to Derek Thomas's number. I don't necessarily think anybody ever will, just because that is just an unbelievable record that Thomas set when he was with the Crimson Tide. But Will Anderson, is he better than Derek Thomas? Maybe, but statistically, that's almost impossible to show.
Would have been the number 1 pick in the NFL draft had he been eligible to come out. Should be the number 1 pick next season, unless it's a quarterback like a Young or a Stroud or somebody of the like. All right, time for our weekly chat about the game coming up on October the 8th against A&M. Jimbo Fisher beat Nick Saban last season. Will Anderson's going to be keying in on A&M in that one. Bama more than a 2-touchdown favorite, 14.5-point favorites at home.
Yeah, take Bama. Just take Bama. Go ahead and lay those points. Nick's going to want to run it up. Nick's going to want to embarrass Jimbo. And I think in a game like that, because Texas A&M actually is a threat on the recruiting trail, Alabama's going to want to make a huge statement. Now, obviously, the Jimbo Saban drama is what it is, but talking to those players at media days, the Alabama players, I think, took it more personally than Nick Saban did. So I would imagine, yeah, Nick keeps his foot on the gas for a very long time. And look, Zach Calzada went throw for throw last year with Bryce Young. I don't think whichever Texas A&M quarterback wins that job is capable of doing that this year, especially with a motivated Crimson Tide team on the other side. So, yeah, 2 touchdowns. Go ahead and lay those points. It might be a 21-point game.
So, Barrett says the assistants are not going to continue that winning streak against Nick Saban this season, or at least the former assistants, Kirby Smart and Jimbo Fisher. Let's move on to the futures market here, and the over-under win total is set at 11, so there's no wiggle room. You lose one game and you don't win. Push is the best you can do. And you can only get plus money, Barrett, on winning the SEC or making the college football playoff. I say you can't get plus money on those. I mean, you still have to pay more money than you'd be getting back. They're only plus money to win it all at plus 180. So really no value, but is anything worth a play?
Yeah, I mean, I'd take over 11. And I think, look, in all likelihood, 11-1, 12-0, you can convince me on any given day that one of those is going to happen. You can't convince me that 10-2 is going to happen. Like, there's just no way that happens. So me personally, I did my helmet schedule. I filled it out, and I have Alabama 12-0. Could I see them getting upset? Sure, they could get upset. I don't think it's likely. They're going to be favored by probably 7 or more points in every single game, maybe even double digits in every single game. Upsets happen. Weird things happen. I get that. But to me, I think over 11 is a really safe bet, because if you don't win, at least you push. I mean, 10-2 for that Alabama team seems almost impossible.
Barrett, Nick Saban, 15th season at Alabama. If you had to guess right now, how many more are we going to get out of him?
Oh, man. If they win, I have always said if they win a national championship, he's gone. I've said this for like 6 or 7 years, and it hadn't happened yet. If he wins a national championship next year or beyond, I think he walks and rides off into the sunset. If he wins one this year, I think he's going to want to stick around a little while longer. But I do not think he's going to coach out the duration of that contract. Look, Nick has calmed down quite a bit. He's become a grandfather. He likes to hang out with the grandkids, all that other stuff. It's not football 24/7, 365 like it used to be. I do think that he's going to be gone within 2 or 3 years. When he wins a national championship, I think that's when he's going to do some real soul searching and say, all right, look, am I done? Is this the right way to go out? And it might be. We'll see.
when he wins a national championship, because you know it's coming either this year or next. He rarely ever goes more than a couple years between national championships at Alabama. Barrett Sallee is with us as we profile our number one team and the number one team in the AP poll preseason, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Barrett can be heard on the Cover 3 podcast, where we cover all things college football ramping up to the season. Get it wherever you find your choice audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.